River is one of those conduits that brings fresh water from places where it's fallen on land into an estuary and then into an ocean. The river as a whole has, like most of the rivers in Puget Sound, a long history of use by animals, plants, native people today, and maybe one of the more notable ways that rivers in general in Puget Sound are used is as a way in which salmon migrate up and down. The rivers around Puget Sound, they vary really substantially in their history of industrialization and urbanization, and the Duwamish is among the most seriously altered of those rivers. So it's had an urban environment growing up around it and an industrialized environment growing up around it for a century and more. The major ongoing threat and building threat to aquatic systems is the impervious surfaces in the watershed. Then one way to combat that is to actually be very deliberate about including vegetation and permeable soils in management plans in a way that that actually can improve the filtration capacity of the land before materials actually move into these conduits, these rivers that just sluice materials along and then out into the ocean. Rising human populations and people's proclivity to live in coastal areas means that there is this incredible pressure to transform landscapes from soil and plants into buildings and roads. And those things conduct water directly off of the surface. They don't allow the water to percolate into the ground and be filtered through natural mechanisms. So there's pesticides, there's herbicides, that whole mix of materials then has less capacity to filter through the ground, tends to run off into aquatic systems. There's a benchmark that people use, and the scientific level that has been found across many, many studies is a level of 10% impervious surface. As soon as a watershed reaches 10% impervious surface, then the water, the rivers and the estuaries within that watershed begin to degrade. The initiation of the Clean Water Act that reflected a time in the 1960s when so many contaminants were put into rivers that they, in certain places, caught on fire, and from the hydrocarbons that were in them. And those were from direct dumping of materials into the river. I think experience with eutrophication and the direct dumping of sewage into rivers has prompted similar sorts of responses, that these are really obvious point sources of contaminants, and it's relatively straightforward to cut off those point sources and say, okay, well, clean water is valuable, let's treat the sewage, or let's stop that effluent going into a river. Making it a Superfund site recognizes that there's been a history of industrial use in the area that has resulted in PCBs and toxic metals being present, but those are things that are certainly coming in at a much slower rate. They're not a result of ongoing industry. So the health of the river now, I think, much more reflects the landscape around the river, and the extent to which sort of the modern cocktail of urban pollutants continues to run into that river. So the point sources are fewer because there's regulations against dumping things like that into rivers, but it's sort of a problem of the death of 1,000 cuts now. So to what extent is that river buffered against impervious surfaces and urbanization happening in the watershed?